Welcome, everyone. I think you're in for a deep and fascinating experience to learn about the life story of a dear friend of mine. And what we're going to be talking about is loss, the other side, and finding happiness in life again, finding your footing and finding love again. So um, I'm here with my dear friend Amy Andersson, and she has beautifully agreed to have a conversation with me to help many of you out there. So Amy, thank you for being here with me today.
Thank you, Linda. It's a pleasure.
So everyone, I want to I'm going to give you just the nutshell version of how I got to know Amy. And then as all of you listen, please think about your own loss issues, how you deal with that, um, soul, the immortality of soul, and finding life and finding your solidity once again. So maybe we'll just do this in conversation. So Amy, tell us a little bit, start with, and these may even be things I don't know all the details about. Um, your first husband, how did you meet? How did that happen?
Yeah, we met as students at the University of Michigan. And he was a doctoral student and I was an undergrad, and we just became the best of friends just shortly after we met. We started spending a lot of time going to concerts and talking about music and hanging out in the practice room, and we met as students.
And what were the two of you studying?
We were both studying conducting.
Okay,
So
okay.
we had everything in common in so many ways.
Interesting. And, I'll just say to the listeners, I think it's no accident, those key people that we meet in our life and those key people that, one day we don't know them and the next day we've met them and that takes us forward. Um, Tell the listeners, Amy, if you will, just a little bit about, I know about your first husband. What country does he come, does he come from? What led him to come to the United States?
Yeah, he was born in St. Petersburg, which was at the time was Leningrad, but now reverted to St. Petersburg. And he immigrated to the United States and settled in New York with his mother, and then came to the University of Michigan to study. So by the time I met him, he spoke pretty good English and had done his undergrad and graduate degree in New York City. And so he was the first doctoral student at the University of Michigan
Ah, fascinating.
that
Okay.
in this new program.
Okay. And how long after you and your first husband, Yaakov, met, how long after that were you married?
Oh, let's see. 5 years after we met.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Beautiful. Um, all right. So going forward, so you married 5 years later,
No,
and
actually 7 years after we met.
okay.
I'm trying to do the math here. Yeah,
Yeah.
7 years after we met.
And trying to remember back to all those specific details. Okay. So what I remember you telling me, Amy, when I first met you was that after you and Yaakov married, and either before or once you began to have children, that what I vaguely remember, if this is correct, that you decided that Yaakov, of course, would move forward with his career in conducting, and you would basically be the stay-at-home mom raising your boys. Is that correct?
Well, no, not exactly. I never really just decided that.
Okay.
I worked all the time, even with children, but his
Okay.
career was all consuming, and it just took him away from our lives in an incredible way. He was, internationally recognized, and he was traveling all the time. And I remember at one point saying, gosh, you're never home and I'm raising the kids myself. And he said, well, that's what we agreed to. And I said, I never agreed to that. Actually, I never agreed to that. Why would I agree to that? We're supposed to be together raising the kids. And it just, he would try to block out his calendar and be home. And then work would encroach. And, he planned 3 years in advance. And he'd say, okay, in 2001, I'm going to be away for, 10 months, and 2000 and the next year. And he would block it way in advance. And it was just a fight to secure time to be home. If you have a high power agent and they love to see their clients out on the road making money, and it's a business too. Anyone who knows the music industry knows that you're earning money for the agency every time you step onto the podium. They're earning 18% of your fee and 18% of every contract you sign. And so it's in their interest to keep you very busy. And it's none of their concern whether or not you're home. And they don't, I don't say it in a mean way, they just don't make it their business to think, oh, he's not home for Christmas, he's not home for the summer. They can't keep track of it. They have a huge roster of people, and their job is to get work and to negotiate contracts, and they're happy to see their clients very busy. And so it turned out that he was way too busy for a family, to have a family. And it's not by chance that many high profile conductors with huge careers have been married multiple times, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And I think there's one conductor who's been married, I don't know, 10 times.
Wow.
And so it's not by chance that conductors are known, not that they're out there doing inappropriate things, but that the marriage doesn't hold up. It's not that they're out there, womanizing, but the marriage doesn't hold up, and there's also some children involved. And the spouse is finally just throw in the towel and say, I can't do this anymore. You've been gone 10 years, you've been gone 15 years. It famously breaks up marriages, this conducting careers, international careers.
Yes.
So I didn't make any decision to stay home and raise the kids. As you said, I worked and I taught at the university, and I was working with orchestras, and I was on tour, and I always managed to fit in work amongst my responsibilities for the kids. Even when he was gone, I managed to always to juggle that somehow.
Okay. 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 That's an important piece. And this is beautiful, because some of these pieces, even though I've known you for a number of years, I didn't know all the details. So
Mhm.
how soon after the two of you were married were each of your boys born?
Yes, 3 years after we were married, our first son was born, and then 9 years after we were married, our second son was born.
Okay. Okay. All right. So now, move forward. We could obviously dig into all kinds of details, but move forward to the point where your husband becomes ill,
Right.
and you have to navigate that.
Right. So we had lived in Europe for many years, and then at one point, I decided to move back with the kids to the States. And it's also very common for conducting spouses to be in different countries. So I decided to move back to the States with the two kids to be closer to my family. And that lasted 10 years. And then he said, I can't do this anymore. I can't go back and forth. And we had a lovely home that we renovated, and the kids were in school. And he said, I just can't do this. I can't do this anymore. So I said, okay, what does that mean? He said, we've got to move. We have to sell the house. You have to move. And we had moved many times. And I said, it's fine. It was difficult, but I felt like he had allowed me to come to the States and be near my folks, and that it was time to focus again on being over there. So we moved back to another new country, and it was only 3 months after we moved, after we had sold the house and packed everything up. And
Mm,
then, and I finished, kind of putting pictures on the walls that he was diagnosed with a terminal illness.
okay.
Yeah. And we were in a foreign country and I didn't speak the language. It was very rough. I didn't have family there. It was really, really tough.
Mhm. And for how long, what's the length of time in between his diagnosis and when he transitioned?
Yeah, it was 22 months.
Okay. Okay. So how, because there are going to be listeners that maybe haven't navigated, as much of an international life and the notoriety and all of that. But on the other hand, what we're talking about is marriage, children, health, illness. Um, how did you, how did you cope with him being so ill and suspecting, based on what doctors told you, that it would be terminal?
How did I cope? Well, our oldest son stayed in the States because he was a university student. So he stayed in the States when we moved over, and I had a then 12-year-old.
Okay.
And how did I cope? I went into overdrive and
Mm.
I did everything that I could. I had ambitions of working when I was over there when we got established, and I quickly dropped all of that because it was sort of my mission to like save him and to find the cure and all that stuff, right? It was just I read every article I could. I spent all nights and nights on the internet. I was calling everyone I knew, asking for advice, and I went into overdrive and tried to. Well, I mean, I tried to be a hero and tried to save him because
Mm.
he wasn't interested in anything about his illness. He never asked any questions. He never talked to his doctors. He didn't even ask what he had. I mean, at one point he even said, "What do I have again? What is it called?"
Mm.
Because for him, it was all about music. And he must have, I don't know, instinctually maybe known that it was very bad. And he made a choice to spend his time making music and not thinking about the illness.
Mhm.
So I took on the role of like being his doctor and being his, you know, somebody who I was booking the appointments and getting those things and talking to doctors. I went into overdrive and I did that. And he, I shouldn't say blissfully because that would be not correct, but he thought just about music and I took care of everything else. From the moment he woke up in the morning, it was just music and I ran around and I cooked every meal from scratch for 18 months and tried to give him the right food. And he went on
Mm.
tour and I came with and I loaded all the suitcases and took him out of the taxi and set everything up in the hotel and I was juicing with a juicer in the hotel and I had fruit in my suitcase and I had sweet potatoes in the suitcase. I mean, I was doing everything. And not sweet potatoes. I didn't have an oven. I couldn't cook in a hotel. I had apples, I had celery, and I had parsley in bags, and we were doing this, health kind of thing. And so, how did I cope? I went into overdrive because I have an ability to be hyper focused and grab onto details. That was my way of coping, and I felt useful. I felt
Totally.
useful. I had a purpose.
Yes, and I think that anytime we're dealing with uh, something where we don't want to feel out of control,
Yes,
we find ways to be in control in,
yes.
in order to cope. I think that's a natural response.
I mean, I think on some level I knew it was out of my control. I mean, I certainly knew that in the middle of the night when I would wake up, with a racing heart, and I knew that it wasn't about me. It was much bigger than me, and it was not in my control. But what can I do on a daily basis? I can be purposeful, I can be helpful, I can be productive. I had to cook, I had to shop, I had to
Mm.
take care of my younger son, I had to stay in touch with my son in America. I had to, we had to we put up a Christmas tree, we had to celebrate, we had to do birthdays all the while knowing in my heart that he was going to die, that this was just something that was very dramatic. And he had a very severe illness and people don't survive it. There's no cure for it.
Right, right, right.
Um,
So, I mean, something else I know, Amy, about you is that you are, in my opinion, and you may or may not agree, but you are very intuitive. Um, so,
I actually knew the moment that the doctor told me in a foreign language, which I didn't speak. I just passed him in the hallway and I said, "Excuse me, I'm trying to find out. I need to speak to somebody about the diagnosis." And he said, "Well, go make an appointment in the office. During the week I'll talk to you then." And then I said, "But I'll do that, but I actually need to know, like, what is the diagnosis?" Because he had just come out of a surgery the day before.
mm,
And he said everything in a foreign language. It was in French actually. And he said, and I just knew then. I just knew it was, over. And he went down the hall and I went into the bathroom and I looked in the mirror and I looked at my watch and I said, "It's 3 o'clock and my life has changed forever. Our lives have changed." And I knew in that moment, he's not going to live. And why would I know that? I mean, most people would say, "Okay, so that's what are you going to do?" But I knew in my heart, it's over. It's done. He's not
oh,
going to,
okay.
which is kind of shocking. I don't know. But it's just who I am. I know those things.
Exactly. And
I
again,
know that. And so
I know.
maybe that was a good thing that I knew it, because I
Mm,
always kept that, I knew to try to live every day and to be mindful and to appreciate every moment together. And maybe it was a blessing, as shocking as it was. Maybe it
mm.
was a blessing because it was like, okay, you need to keep an eye on this, and you know where you're heading, so get prepared. Although I was not prepared. I mean, you can't be prepared for something like that.
Well, and obviously, Amy, I mean, the people that are listening, I'm sure, know the work that I do. So it's this dance between um, logic and emotion, or logic and intuition. It's sort of like what you just said. Um, Perhaps your higher self, your guides, maybe your husband's guides wanted you to know where things were heading, so that, as you just said, that you would perhaps have a different vantage point or a different valuing of the time you had left. But on the other hand, you live in a human body. So you're dealing with human struggles and human ups, downs, and sideways kinds of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I,
yeah.
ke- I kept thinking, I have my feet in two worlds. One world knows I've been given this information and he's definitely not going to make it. And then I had the human world with, well, we're going to keep trying. We're going to keep trying. Maybe we should try this, maybe try that. And I felt like it was two universes I was juggling
Yes, yes.
constantly. And it was like, this is so weird.
Mhm,
It
mhm.
was just so disconcerting.
And that makes perfect sense that you'd be sort of, caught between two masters, so to speak.
Yes, yes, I was.
Yeah, and yeah. Okay, so moving forward, so 22 months later, your husband, humans would say die. I, as a spiritual person, would say transition, pass.
Mhm.
That occurred. Um, after your husband passed, did you sense him at all? Did you sense his energy, his presence?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I had never experienced anything like it. And I had never read any books about it. I'd never heard about it. But I mean, when he took his last breath and exhaled, I felt like I was hit by a huge burst of energy. And I
Mm,
didn't know what happened. I just felt, and it's so strange to say this, but I felt extraordinary elation and extraordinary bliss. And
mm,
it's so strange in that moment to feel that, because I was devastated. He had just died or just left his body. And then I felt this incredible sense of ecstasy. And I was very confused.
Do you think, Amy, that when you say what you just said, and some of this I'm hearing from the for the first time, do you think to a degree you traveled with him? You traveled with his soul energy as it was elevating, which I know that's from guiding regression for me for years and years and years. Do you think you were traveling to a degree to assist the elevation of his soul as it left his physical human
Well,
body?
yeah, that's perhaps a way to explain it. I went to this grief conference out in St. Louis in 2012 or 2013. And I saw you there, and
Ah,
I did a special workshop on shared death experiences
yeah.
because I didn't know what happened and I didn't understand. And so I talked to this gentleman, I don't remember his name, Bill something, and he they have a shared death experience project, and it's a thing on the West Coast. And he's written several books. And I told him what happened, and he had me stand up with the group and tell them. And he said it was a shared death kind of thing where yeah, maybe their soul goes through them. You feel what they're feeling as they leave their body. You feel that what they're feeling as they're transitioning. And if that's what they're feeling, it is very beautiful over there. I have never in my life felt such exquisite joy.
Wow.
It's really, there's nothing like this on earth. And you can imagine I was so confused. Like, what was that? And I felt that way for 2 weeks. I mean, in between, crying and breaking down, and I had to cook, and I had to go shopping, and we had to do funeral arrangements, and we had to move. We had to
Right.
move out of the apartment, and I was packing boxes. It was just, upheaval. And then I would have these moments, and I would look in the mirror, and it's like my face would just be radiant. And I was like,
Mm.
maybe I've gone insane. Maybe I've gone crazy. What's happening? And people kept saying, you look so incredible. And I was very confused.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when I found out that it's actually something that they've documented over hundreds and thousands of cases,
Yeah.
and people feel that even if they're 1,000 miles away from the person who passes.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then I started putting the pieces together, and I said, oh my gosh,
Mm.
this makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense to me as well, having guided so many clients through past lives to the end of the past life, and then the client describing what they sense, sort of remembering, redoing that transition. The words are always peace, love, tranquility, those kinds of things.
And actually when I came back to the States, after he passed 6 weeks later. And I was actually so disturbed by what I experienced that I went to a hospice nurse. Somebody
Mm,
said, you need to speak to this hospice nurse. And I spoke to her in person. I went in and talked to her, I think, twice. And she says, well, this is something that hospice nurses and hospice doctors, mostly the nurses, know about and talk about amongst ourselves. And, most doctors don't want to admit it, but I work with a very wonderful doctor who says, yes, we know what goes on. And that as they pass, as they transition, if you're there, if you're sensitive, if you're open, I don't know what has to happen, but if you're lucky,
right.
you experience that extraordinary surge of energy and ecstasy and beauty and joy. And she said that's one of the reasons why I love my work so much, because I know that it's not the end when they pass away. I know, she said, in my bones, I experience it every single time. I know that the spirit lives on, and that's why I love my work.
Mm.
as sad as it is to see them leave the physical body, and the family is very upset and the family is devastated. She said, it just reaffirms what I know. And it's a beautiful thing that I like to see over and over again. And she said, anyone who works in the hospice, they will probably never talk about it, but we know amongst ourselves that it's real. I mean, we can't make stuff like that up.
Right.
We can't
Exactly.
make it up.
Exactly.
And she shared it with me. She said that was his final gift.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
was very important
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah. Yeah, and to know it's almost it's a means of communication.
Yes.
It's a means of giving you energetic communication, that he's no longer suffering and that he's on that natural return journey,
Yeah.
reconnecting back to his soul. Okay,
Yeah. I
so
it's
you came back to the US, 6 weeks later. Um, and how did you, so talk a little bit about the next steps of your life. How soon did you return to conducting? What else were you doing? I mean, I know that you came back. I know you came back to be near family. Um, yeah, what was that like? And how soon did you return back to your
yeah.
conducting career?
Well, it was very rough time. I came back. I didn't, we had sold this beautiful house that we had, and I drove past it, and I think I don't live there anymore. Um, I couldn't actually find a place I wanted to rent a house, and they wouldn't nobody in the area would rent a house with two cats, and I refused to give up my cats.
Yeah,
So for 3 months, we just stayed in this Marriott residence place, and then I ended up buying a house because I didn't know what to do. I mean, I bought a house, I didn't really like it. It was sad. I moved all my things in there, and I tried the best that I could, but it was a very rough year. And my younger son came back and went into a new school, and he didn't know anyone in the school. It was a very rough year.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I felt completely lost. I was physically and emotionally exhausted. And, in spite of feeling this, exquisite, joy and all that stuff, but the
yeah.
reality, and that's one
Sure.
side of this thing. The other reality is I've got to shop and I've got to cook and I have this house now. And what am I doing? What in
And
the world am I doing? And so I started applying for jobs, and I was dusting off my resume and putting things together. And I flew to the East Coast. I had an audition on the East Coast. I flew to Lithuania for an international conducting workshop. I tried to stick my toes back in. I was devastated, though. I was absolutely and completely shattered.
Mm. Well,
And
and as much as I know you're a spiritually oriented person and a very intuitive person, what I so often say to people is grief is grief is grief, and that we have to we can't avoid the natural, sort of pits of grief, because that's the only way we get through letting ourselves go through the emotions, deal with the pain and struggle, because it's the
yeah,
only way we swim across the river of grief.
yeah. And I found it was very difficult because I was young. When I grew up, women who were widowed, it's usually the women who end up being widowed. And when I grew up, the widows were older women, and I wasn't told how to talk to anybody who had lost a spouse. I remember hearing, oh, she lost her husband. And as a kid, you don't know what to say. You don't understand what that means. You don't understand what the implications are. So I was unprepared to lose a spouse, to be this widow.
Yeah,
And I don't even like the term widow. It sounds like a spider or something.
exactly,
But
exactly.
I'm suddenly like, I'm a widow, and I just, there were so many changes that I had to make in my thinking. I'm suddenly like, but am I single? Am I single? But I still wore his wedding ring my wedding ring for the first year with his together.
Mm-hmm.
Am I single? But I'm still married because I still love him. And
Mm.
it was very difficult, very
Yeah.
difficult. And I just had to pick myself up every day and say, you've got to get out of the house and be productive and start thinking about the future. And was in Colorado and I said, I'm never going to make it in this town. I have to move. I've got to get out of here. I see friends who really know are no longer interested in seeing me because friendships sometimes dissolve when you become widowed.
Sure.
And I thought, I've got to move to New York. I've got to find a job. I've got to get out of here. So less than a year after I bought the house, I sold it.
So here's a quick question. When you decided you needed to move to New York, what are your thoughts? Do you feel like, and I don't know what your answer will be, do you feel like you were guided somehow to return back to a city where there would be opportunity, where it would fit with your skills and your profession? Do you feel like that was guidance? What's your thought about that?
Yeah, it's hard to know because I'm 95% of what I do is on intuition. So I never
Okay.
think, am I being guided? I
Okay.
just
Okay.
act. Yeah.
What
And I
was
thought it's most sensible. That's where I went to school. That's where we met.
Hmm.
It's just there's enough going on that it would keep me, busy. And I'm more likely to get a job.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I
And I
packed up
love
and I moved again to a city where I knew no one.
but I love what you're saying, Amy, in the sense that, some of this I'm earmarking for people that are going to benefit from listening to your story and what happened is when you say whatever you said, 90% or 95%, whatever you said, that you function on intuition. And, there might be some, I mean, that makes perfect sense to me. There might be some people listening that don't quite get that. And so if I can just kind of put a bit of a picture frame around that, that we're always guided and we're always, so what is our intuition? Well, it's the core of who we are that is being led not down a rabbit hole into problems in our life, but if we trust our intuition,
Mm.
then in my opinion, it's
Mhm.
beneficial. So I feel like that's kind of what you're saying.
Yes, yes. I always trust my intuition. And when I don't, it's not good.
Yes.
I have learned to trust it because it's never wrong. It's never wrong.
How, again, helping people who are listening, and these may seem like, sort of simplistic questions, but blah, blah, blah. Two questions. Answer this however it fits for you. How did you learn to trust your intuition? And maybe another piece of that is how did you learn to listen to your intuition?
Yeah, I've always listened to my intuition, but trusting your intuition is a different thing. My intuition is always telling me things constantly.
Okay.
How to learn how to trust it? Way back when I remember hearing that somebody was sick, and oh, this gentleman's sick, and maybe you should visit him. And I was young, I was a teenager, and I remember thinking, he's gonna die. He's gonna die. Oh my gosh, he's gonna die very soon. And then I remember thinking, well, that's just ridiculous. I'll visit him next week.
Right.
And then my intuition said, oh, it's very soon. You need to visit him like today or tomorrow. And I had all
Mhm.
kinds of things going on, and I didn't visit him, and he died 2 days later.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it happened again with somebody else.
Mm.
When I was overseas, I remember seeing somebody at a party after a concert, and I looked at him and I said, "Oh my God, he's going to die." And again, and again, it's like, what?
Yeah.
And then I got this feeling he's going to die, and within a week he was dead. He died of a
Yeah.
massive heart attack.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes I think, oh my goodness, why am I given this information? But I don't ask that question anymore. It is
Okay.
what it is. I'm given it,
Okay.
and I can choose to act on it or not. But
Yes.
I always trust it now because it's never failed me.
I love that. I love what you're saying. Okay. So moving forward, now I kind of have two, I'm sort of, guiding our conversation here. I have two questions in my brain, but the first question is, so okay, so you with your younger son moved to New York. Um, how soon did you begin to feel like you were getting back into your career and opportunities were beginning to show up? Did that take quite a while? Did it not?
Oh, well, I was so heartbroken. I thought I would never, ever pursue music again. I didn't even want to listen to music.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
class, so-called classical music.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to look at my scores. I couldn't look at my CDs. It was a heartbreaking thing. And I said, I've given it up. That's it.
Okay.
And but then I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I spent the first year in New York actually pursuing jazz studies. I was studying
Oh,
jazz singing with a wonderful teacher.
okay.
And I actually started singing as a therapeutic thing because I figured it would help me,
Mm,
I don't know, heal somehow. And I went to I went to my lessons once a week and I would cry through the whole 50 minutes.
okay.
For the first 6 months, all I did is cry.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
It's a good thing because I need to cry. And I
Right.
started singing slowly, 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 started
Mm,
singing. And I made great progress. I'm a good singer, and it was something that I always wanted to do.
right.
So I spent the first year singing and crying and walking through this big city, which was, it's fascinating. There's so much going on. If you feel lonely, you step outside your apartment, and the world is whizzing by.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I didn't know anyone. I was completely alone. My
Okay.
son was in school all day, and I would walk everywhere and look at buildings and look at people and walk through the park and think about music. And I went to jazz clubs at night and I'd listen to jazz musicians. And I, I, I was, I was still recovering. It was difficult, and I
Of
still gave
course.
myself a little bit of space. And then at the end of the year and a half that I was there, or the first year that I was there, then an opportunity arose for me to step in and to do some conducting on a tour.
Mm,
And I had given away all my conducting clothes and my jacket and my shoes, and I just had my batons left because I thought really I would never do it again.
right.
And the opportunity arose, and I said, I'm going to try it. It's something very different, and it's one of these live to picture shows, and it uses the click track and the technology. And I said, okay, let me try it. And it was the moment I started to prepare and look at my score and prepare for this concert, I felt better. I felt I really can't leave this behind. This is what I have to do. I've got to get back in the game.
Okay.
So I did, and I felt completely at home. And I
Mm,
thought, how could I have ever thought I would leave this? But I
okay.
was so distraught. And
Yeah.
so, I had moved to the States and then I moved to New York, and um, my life was so turned upside down. It's not surprising. I thought, well, okay, I'm just gonna throw in the towel.
Right. 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 Plus you're
That's
grieving.
understandable.
I mean, grief is such a complex experience. And
Oh, it is. It is.
yeah. And so that, to me, that's a piece of the puzzle of, grief is almost like, I mean, I've gone through grief and loss myself, and it's what led me to become a psychologist. And it's like when you're in the middle of it, excuse me, when you're in the middle of it, it's like you're underwater. It's hard to breathe. It's hard to even know whether do I step forward, do I step backward, do I step sideways? Because that's grief.
Yeah. And that first year or even two, I mean, it's the first year, certainly it's 98% of my brain and my time is just all consumed by grief.
Mhm, mhm.
And it's you have to learn how to navigate it, and say, right now I have something to do. I have to file the income taxes. So I'm not going to play the music that makes me cry. I'm not
Right.
going to look at the photograph.
Yeah,
I need to focus and get the income taxes in because otherwise I'm going to get in trouble if I don't file
exactly.
the income. And I learned how to block out space and say, don't go there, not now. You can't
Yes.
completely fall apart. You've got to do A, B, C, and D. And slowly, slowly, slowly,
Mhm.
grief is less all consuming. It kind of shrinks down. It shrinks
Mhm.
slowly, slowly. But I felt like I had to work on it. I had to work on revitalizing my life, my own life, because
Mhm.
I felt when my husband passed that I lost my life too.
Yeah,
Felt like I lost my life. The
of
life, I
course.
certainly did lose the life that I knew.
And you lost the life that you thought would continue.
Would continue, right? And so I
Right.
had to reconfigure who I was. And
Hmm.
I realized I haven't lost Amy. I haven't lost my musical abilities. I haven't lost all those things. It just feels so different. And I have to strengthen those things now and really,
Mm.
really stand up and be strong. And it was very hard. I was very determined, but it was not easy by any means.
So add in, if you will, Amy, and this is complicated because I want you to keep talking about how your work and your career began to move forward, which I certainly know a certain amount about, but I think it's also important for the listeners for you to add in the other grief experience that you ended up having to face.
Yeah. And it was uh 3 years after my husband passed, my oldest son passed away. And that was devastating in a different kind of way
Mm.
because to lose a child is probably the worst. Um,
I would agree.
yeah. So, um, but I knew that my husband had passed away and I survived it. It didn't
Mm.
take me down.
Mm.
So I knew somehow, although it was incredibly difficult, I said, this is not going to take me down. I'm not going to lose my life. I
Mm.
still have my life. I still have my younger son.
Yes.
I am going to survive. I am going to survive. I don't care what it takes.
Mm.
This is not bringing me down. And I like raged against the like universe. I said, you are not taking me down.
Wow.
Don't you dare. I mean, I literally got on the floor and I screamed on the floor and I said, you're not taking me down. No way.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I just rose up like, I don't know, with
Yeah.
Herculean energy. And I said, we have got to survive this.
Uh, have you felt the energy, the soul, the communication from your older son since he
Yeah.
passed?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Not as much as with my husband, maybe because my husband and I were together so many years and
Right?
my son was younger. But definitely,
Okay.
definitely. Less in the last few years. It will be 10 years in January.
Okay.
So
Okay.
less in the last years, although I had a dream on my birthday 2 weeks ago, and he came to me in my dream and he looked great and we talked and we were
Oh,
doing something. And it's like, I don't know if I traveled to him or if he traveled to me or where we met, but it was like, oh,
oh,
on my birthday. And I hadn't seen him in my dreams for several years. And he suddenly
I
appeared.
love that.
And it was the best birthday gift ever.
Oh, how awesome. How awesome. Yeah. I mean, you know the work that I do. I have no doubt that we have access to the other side, that the soul continues, and that's just what a beautiful birthday gift. Awesome.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, and I know this is probably challenging for you to keep, jumping back and forth, but I know a certain amount about how your career moved forward, and I know about some of the, I would say, awesome creations and support. in my opinion, support to aid humanity in the projects that you've created. So say a little bit about, and then we're going to get to the love in your life at currently, but say a little bit about your career and how it began to move and what led you into new projects and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I got my first tour in 2014, and that led then to a larger world tour in 2015 and 2016 to 65 cities and
Wow.
14 countries. And um, yeah, it was at the beginning of my first tour in 2015 when my son passed away, and I had to cancel my first appearance because he had just died, and I needed to go on stage a week later, and I canceled that, but I took 2 weeks off, and then we started the tour in Hawaii, and I found incredible strength and joy in being in front of an orchestra and hearing how happy the audience was and how much they cheered, and it gave me incredible joy.
Mm,
I carried at the same time the loss.
right. What?
But it was so wonderful to be on stage and to have, I could say, the distraction of music, but that's a little bit too superficial because music is not a distraction, it's a profound experience. So I had the great fortune to be able to pour my heart out into music, and it felt so good. It
Mm,
felt so therapeutic.
mm,
And
awesome.
every time I went on stage, I thought of my son.
Hmm.
And I would kiss my husband and my son from the stage. Every time I gave my final bow, I would always wave to them. So
Mm,
I felt like they were on tour with me,
uh-huh.
and I
Uh,
didn't feel alone. And it was so good for me. And after the tour, I did 65 cities, and I was tired of it. I was tired of the same show over and over and over.
yeah.
And so then I decided to form my own orchestra here in New York. And we made, yeah, I finished the tour in 2017 in January. And by September, I had my own orchestra, and we made a debut at Carnegie Hall. I mean, that quickly. I don't know how I managed to do all that, but I was on kind of on a roll, and I had a lot of energy and put
Right.
together a program. We made this wonderful debut. And so then right after that debut, I got another project in my mind. And it took me 2 years to create it. And then we debuted, we premiered at Lincoln Center. So I was suddenly really immersed in my creative vision.
Mm. Uh,
Um,
talk about that second project, which I certainly know about, but talk about, either what led you into that project or how it felt, or because it's a profound project in my opinion.
yeah. Yes, the second project was Women Warriors, the Voices of Change. And it came to me in sort of a dream. I had this, I still have it. I wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., and that's the magic hour.
Okay.
And I actually heard something on a podcast about why that happens, but I don't actually remember, but there's a reason, I
It's
guess.
very common. And I'll just say very briefly, and then I want you to keep going. My sense is my thought about that, and because that happens to me at times and a lot of people, that there's part of my understanding about that is that when in the beginning of when we're sleeping or for a number of hours, once we've gone to sleep, our soul loosens and our soul connects more to our own higher self. Our soul goes out and we might say works
Uh-huh.
in the higher realm. And then somewhere between, for many of us, between 3 and 5 a.m., a lot of people talk about 4 a.m. per se, our soul begins to return. It doesn't, certainly doesn't fully leave or we wouldn't remain alive, but our soul then begins to kind of connect back into its moorings, if you will, into the body somewhere around that hour.
And then we wake up with these ideas.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
because that definitely happened to me. I woke up and I heard women warriors, the voices of change. And I said, wow, I don't know what that is, but it sounds incredibly powerful.
Mm,
And then a couple nights later, I had this dream about Fannie Lou Hamer, the voting rights activist. I dreamt about her. I had these sort of prophetic dreams. And I said, well, I'm just going to trust my intuition that there's something here. And so I started researching women warriors. What are women warriors? And I researched for 2 years and created the 70-minute silent documentary and hired 8 incredible film composers, and they composed to picture, and I formed the orchestra again with the same players as last time, and we debuted at Lincoln Center. And again, I followed my intuition. I felt so grateful that I hear my intuition. I'm grateful that I follow it. I'm grateful that I trust it.
right.
And I felt grateful that I was able to work so hard and bring this to life. I mean, there's just so much gratitude I have for the whole experience.
Mm, mhm. I mean, as you know, my husband and Earl and I were present at the debut at Lincoln Center, and it was just an extraordinary energy, an extraordinary experience to witness the power of certain women,
Mm.
souls and body, but certain women on our planet
Mhm.
affecting change on for
Yeah.
humanity.
Yeah. And I won a Grammy for the album that we then recorded.
Mhm.
Grammy. I won several awards, and it was just an incredible honor to walk with those women composers and walk with those women in the film, to walk with them
Mm, awesome.
through their lives. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, well, moving down the road, I'm sure listeners are wondering now, where are we headed? So, I mean, we could talk forever, Amy, but now talk about which was the trigger for me to decide and I was so blessed that you agreed to do this with me. Talk about finding love again in your life. Just say what you want to say about where you are now, the love in your life. Just share with the listeners about that.
Well, I got married 2 months ago, just about 2.5 months ago.
Mhm.
I met this wonderful man 11 years ago. So it was 2 years after my husband passed away.
Okay.
I had, I just, I just had no idea if I'd ever date again, or I couldn't envision myself being married. It was very complicated. It was,
Yeah,
I I still felt married to my husband.
of course. That makes perfect sense.
So my son went to the same school as my now husband's daughter went to. We met at a parents' night,
Mm, okay.
and we just struck up a conversation and exchanged, information, and we texted a little bit, and it was actually it wasn't for 3 months until we were able to, like, let's get together for a drink, because he was
Mm,
busy and I was busy and he was traveling for work. And so 3 months later we got together for a drink, and then he said, let's go out to dinner. So we went
mm,
out to dinner
okay.
and we sort of hit it off, and we started seeing each other. We went for walks in the park and went for drives, and he was very busy. We didn't see each other a lot, but we steadily started seeing more and more of each other.
Mm,
And after 2 years of dating, he said, let's move in together.
mhm,
So I moved in, and yeah, we were together for 10 years when he proposed. And it took me completely by surprise,
mm.
because I was incredibly happily married, and I didn't feel the need to try to recreate anything.
Right,
I
right.
said, we get along great. And I
Mm,
always thought, don't fix it if it isn't broken.
right, right.
And I was happy to be together, but
Mm,
I didn't need to get married. I didn't feel like it
mhm.
was anything that had to be done. So when he proposed, I said, what, are you kidding? I was, but then of course I said, immediately said yes.
Yes.
And we got married 2 months ago. And it's, I have a picture of my late husband on my nightstand next to my bed.
Hmm.
And I still think about him. I still love him. I
Hmm.
love both of them.
Hmm.
I love both of them. And my current husband knows that. He knows that I love my late husband very much. And my late husband will always be a part of my life.
Hmm.
And I think about him every day. And I think about my son every day. Uh, and I have a new chapter in my life now. And I'm at peace with that. It's very important that my current husband is very accepting of my love for my ex-husband. And he sees a picture of my husband next to my bed. And we talk about him a lot. We
Hmm.
talk about him. And I integrate that into our life. If he didn't ever want to hear about my late husband or see a picture, it wouldn't work. If he would have
Yeah,
said, "What's that picture? Take it away. What are you doing?"
right.
I'd be out of here in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
But he was very accepting and very loving and wanted to hear the stories and tell me about your husband and where was he when you did this and that. And so um,
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
has been a great blessing.
Hmm. So it's almost like the integration of
Yes, yes,
of your life. It's not like close a door and lock it. It's
no,
the door is open and there's integration.
yes.
It reminds me, Amy, of something I get asked a lot in my work. And people, in fact, just this past week in a regression with someone, this came forward. And the woman said to me, the client said to me, is this person my soulmate? And I said, so as I often do, I said, okay, let's pause. I said, before I respond to that, because we were doing soul level work, as you know, that I do that kind of work. So I said to the client, please tell me what you mean by soulmate. And so, in my humble opinion, in our human culture, we have this Pollyanna picture of we have a soulmate. There's somebody, I mean, I'm chuckling inside of myself, and you probably are too, but it's like we have this, we're taught this Pollyanna picture of there is one person that you're meant to be with, and it will be the perfect romantic relationship, blah, blah, blah. And I say to clients, I don't believe that's true. And often people that we end up feeling close to, whether they're lovers or children or grandparents or mentors or whatever, are souls we've had lives with, souls we've known before.
Which
But
which are soulmates, right?
yes, exactly, that we
Yes.
have more than one soulmate,
Yeah.
and it might be your next door neighbor, and I don't mean that in a romantic sense, or it
It's
might be,
someone you feel a deep connection with.
yes,
Yeah, there's an uncanny deep connection. I absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
So, part of what prompted me, I'll say this for the listeners, Amy, you've heard me say this, is that um, Earl and I had the blessing of you including Earl and me for your wedding weekend 2.5 months ago. And I don't even know what the emotion is about, but I can, and I think I've told you this, Amy, when the save the date card came, whatever it was earlier this year, I literally just said to Earl, we need to be there. And fortunately, Earl said, sure, fine, that I agree with you. That's what we need to do. But uh, I don't even understand. I would have to get quiet and tap into my intuition. I just knew, Amy, that there is some strong connection that I and my husband Earl too feel with you. And we were so thrilled. I certainly knew about your current husband, that there was someone in your life. I'd known that for a number of years. But I think a piece of it, without going very much farther with my chattering here, is wanting to celebrate honestly with you and with your husband, wanting to celebrate joy, happiness, love, life moves forward. We have to grieve, and then we, as you say, we have to find some way to have the strength to move forward because life is not over uh, when we have loss.
Yeah,
So,
and life is short, and life's a precious gift.
yes.
And what a shame not to live our lives
Mm,
even through grief and loss. What a
yes.
shame it would be to squander it, to squander really it all on grief,
Mm,
to keep pouring into the grief all your energies and all your focus, why everything else around it diminishes.
mhm.
And in that first year or two, it's so rough and you're consumed by that. Uh, I was consumed by that. But what a shame it would have been if I would have continued to just lay on the couch and cry into a pillow like I did the first 6 months
Right.
and not put energy into my life and reconstructing my life in a new way to put the pieces together. It's like a vase that was shattered on the ground, and I had to collect all the pieces that I could find, even if I couldn't find them all. And I had to carefully glue it back together and say, it's a vase, but it looks very different.
Right.
The vase, nonetheless, and I'm going to put water in it and I'm going to put flowers in it and put it on the table. So there.
That's a
And
beautiful
I just,
analogy.
uh, yeah, I do know people who have lost children or a spouse, and they were never able to put their lives back together again. And I understand it. It can easily happen. I mean, a couple times I thought, I just can't do this. I
Right.
I can't do this. The task is too enormous.
Mm, mm,
But I tried, I kept trying, and thank goodness, because, you know, I always say to my husband, my current husband, all things considered,
mm.
like all things considered, with everything that's happened, all things considered, life is very good. I always
Yes. Yes.
he'll say, how do you feel? And I'll say, all things considered, pretty terrific.
Yeah.
I feel happy, all things considered.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
grateful that I was able to move forward. You don't move on. That's a very sad term in a way, because I didn't move on for anything. I took everything with me.
Mhm.
All my
Exactly.
grief and my pain and my loss and my memories, and I moved forward in
Yeah.
reconfiguring
Mhm.
how in the heck I'm going to, manage, and who am I now? And I'm so grateful.
Yeah.
So
I
grateful
think
I was able
I,
to do that.
I think you'll find this maybe not surprising, but perhaps interesting, Amy. People ask me all kinds of questions about soul and life and all of that. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, Linda, are there themes in past lives? You, Linda, guide both past life regression and soul level regression. Linda, are there themes in the journey of our lives, lifetime to lifetime? And the answer is yes. And one of the themes that I have heard far more times from clients, that I've heard far more times than once, is the theme where the guides of the client take the client into a past life, and the client accesses a past life of loss. And in the past life, often the client caves into depression, caves into grief, and almost like goes to bed and never comes out of bed again, so to speak. Not necessarily takes their life, of course, that on occasion happens, but just doesn't move forward in their life. And what the guides of the client are saying is that is not what we would hope you would do when you experience loss. It's a ridiculous, silly way to put it, but when life gives you lemons, make lemonade. It's like when life gives you loss, take your time, grieve, feel it, feel awful because that's part of grieving, and then find a way to find life and joy and pleasure, and don't let the loss completely take you
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
It's a very hard path. I remember The first, it was a year after my husband had passed. He passed in March, and so it was a year later in March, and I was back in the States, and it was, I guess it was Easter, end of March, and that date always moves around. I never
Yeah.
know when Easter is, but it moves around. It was maybe the end of March, and I had hid some Easter eggs outside for my son to collect. And there was a little bit of snow, and I went out in the early morning and I put a bunch of Easter eggs out. And he came out in his clothes and had a basket and was gathering the Easter eggs. And there were little flowers poking up under the snow. There were little daffodils and little things.
Right.
And I remember saying, I was so upset
Mm,
because I realized life was going on.
mm,
Spring was coming.
right.
And I thought, spring didn't wait for me.
Ah.
Spring didn't wait for me. I thought everything would stop,
Mm,
wait for me. But
mhm,
no, the sky is blue, the sun is out, the flowers are coming out, and it's Easter.
mhm,
And here I sit with my grief.
mhm,
Nobody, no, nobody cares.
mhm.
Everything is moving forward, and no one's waiting for me. Nothing's waiting for me.
Right. Right.
And I remember standing there going, oh my God, the flowers are coming up.
Mhm.
Like, how dare those flowers come up? I'm
Yeah.
not ready for spring. I'm not ready for flowers at all.
Yes, and what you're saying, Amy, that I learned years ago when my husband and I had a baby born prematurely, and he lived a short time and passed, is two things. One, grief always includes a certain amount of anger because we don't want that person to be gone. We want that person back, or we didn't want them to pass. But then when you say what you just said, Amy, what I remember so clearly, sometime in probably the first year to 18 months after the passing of our second child, is that it felt like everywhere I looked in the world, everybody was pregnant. I saw pregnant women. It was like the world was almost totally populated by pregnant women. And I'd been pregnant and I'd had a baby and that baby didn't survive. And it was just so, so painful. Um, but just like you, a couple years later, I was pregnant again, and that is the beautiful third child and our second living child, our daughter. Our daughter came into the world, and she's a joy and a mother, and she's great. So um, we have to go through those stages of grief. It's the only way we work it through. So
Yeah, yeah,
anyway,
yeah.
well, we should bring this to a close. I just can't honestly say enough of appreciation and gratitude to you, Amy, for just sharing and letting people walk the journey with you and listen to the steps that have happened in your life. And so thank you so much. Just for the benefit of the listeners, tell the listeners a little bit about how to find you, Amy, how to find Warriors of Change in case people want to listen to that. Just share how people can find the work that you've done.
Right. The album Woman Warriors, The Voices of Change is on Spotify. You can look up Amy Anderson. I'm on Spotify and the album is there. I have a website, my own amyandersonconductor.com. And then I also have the Women Warriors, The Voices of Change.com. And there's a website you can see photographs and all about the project. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Well, this has been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me.
It
And I
is,
hope it helps
I can't
some
imagine
listeners.
I can't imagine that it will not help people going through their own process. So thank
And
you.
they're not alone.
Exactly.
Even though people don't talk about loss and about grief and about losing a spouse. And it's a silent community of people who are suffering. But there's millions of people die every day. There's
That's right.
millions of people who lose children and spouses and family members, every single second, there are people who are passing. And so it's part of the human experience. I mean, it's deeply embedded in the human experience. Shockingly, we don't talk about it. It's just ridiculous.
Our culture, sadly, in so many ways,
Yeah.
runs away from pain,
Right?
and pain doesn't resolve if we run away from it. So,
No,
yeah.
pain only I only healed from my pain because I was able to work through it.
Mhm.
I was
Totally.
able to keep going, and I don't know, the pain made me stronger. It made
Mhm.
me my
Mhm.
will to survive very strong.
Yes, I would agree. Pain changed my life in ways, in directions I never would have gone.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
so thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And
Thank
yeah.